do, not to do, right? And we got a lot of mistakes from students. So every year we actually share the mistakes. So this time we're going to share the latest mistake, latest tips, latest success cases, and also failed cases. And so hopefully we can inside this new application season. Hopefully everybody can understand how to build up the essay foundation in the long-term run. So today we're going to talk about the common challenges and how can we get a good college essay, and what is the pace and timeline, and how can we understand what is considered as a good essay. And we're also going to show you the good essay samples analyzed by Dr. Grablik. And we're going to also show you bad essay samples and analyzed by Dr. Grablik as well. So Dr. Grablik is one of the college essay experts working with us for a long time. I believe he will have more things to share. So yeah, and we're also going to leave the Q&A in the end. So let's start.
All right. Thank you, June. Thank you, Judy. And as June mentioned, I probably have a lot of things to share, and I hope to get in as many relevant and useful things as I can within the time, and still saving some time at the end for Q&A. And June, of course, will be joining in and adding some additional insight. So for some of these things, I'm possibly going to just brush through quickly because I want to make sure that you understand overall what are some really key things to be aware of during the season, because as June mentioned, we learn a lot about, the do's and don'ts, and in really stressing the things to do, the things that will be helpful. Hopefully you'll realize that the opposite or anything unsaid would be not to be done. Now, among the challenges, this is largely challenges that students may deal with in trying to come up with ideas for what to include in their essays. Now, let me just say a couple of things before I go into this, and we'll cover some more of this on later slides. Most students will have a list of several schools for which at least one, and if not all, UC schools are an exception, will involve the common application essay. So that's one of the key things to be done. The UC essays, there's a set of 4, and those make for really strong foundational material for all the applications, even the ones that are not UC. You can reuse a lot of the material here. So some of the challenges that go along with all of that in trying to take in what seems to be an overwhelming task. Number one, on a given essay, a student may choose a topic that's too broad to grasp. Let's address that in terms of the common application. The people who are reading your essay want to find out something specific and personal about you, something that you've done in which you overcame or took on a challenge and then overcame it as well, or maybe dealt with one that's unexpected, or some way in which you learned something about yourself, had a big epiphany or transformed in some way, or someone else. So instead of giving an essay that just tries to cover every last thing that you, a student, did, it's better to focus on something more specific, okay? And that goes along with bullet point 2, something that's too vague and doesn't have enough concrete substance. Bear in mind the people reading your essays are not your high school teachers who are going to look over each word one at a time and grade you. They have a big stack of applications to get through, and they want to have their time well spent. They don't want to come up with an example, or they don't want to visualize on their own or come up with a scenario on their own of what you did. You have to do it for them. And if you can engage them by telling them something anecdotal, so much the better. Okay. The 4th point, struggling to get a sense of the writing, unsure of the message to convey to the admissions officer. Let me say one really important thing to all students here who are wondering how to really get started with this. I like to tell students at the beginning, when you're brainstorming, don't judge, don't edit. Just get anything down on paper. When you've got a coach,
hard.
That's hard?
Yeah, it's hard because that's the hardest thing. They can talk, they can meet, they can brainstorm, whatever. It's just never going to put in a paper. So that's why it takes a lot of effort last year to drag people in the office, to lock them in the room, to put the mute. I was like, oh, today I'm going to lock the door. Nobody going to get out if you put something, if you're not putting something on a paper. So that is something I feel like it's hard because everybody, when they start to try to write, they try to write a perfect essay. They try to start thinking about writing a good essay. It's really hard to conquer that feeling like, oh, I'm going to write a poor draft. Later on, I'm going to improve it. So they just really want to try hard, try to start with good. I actually watching a lot of students, after meeting you, they were sitting there and then they write a first sentence, they delete it, write a first sentence, delete it. And I can see how many times they deleted when I look at the draft history. So there's never be the full story come out.
Yeah, and that is thank you, Jen. That's certainly a key thing for me, and that's why I say don't edit yourself initially. Don't expect the perfect essay to come out. When you have something at the end, it's going to look great, but the process you go through is often a little bit, not as linear or beginning to end. And I often tell students, write more than you need. Just let the ideas flow. And when you work with a counselor or an essay coach, that person can often tell you, aha, here's where the key nuggets are. Here's something to expand on. So realistically, just write, and it's amazing what your subconscious will pop out.
Mhm.
Yeah, then the next thing, repeating arguments multiple times, being repetitive, poor time management, delaying subsequent paperwork. That's why I think the best thing to say to the rest of that is get started early. June, wouldn't you say this is a really good time now, early summer, June in particular, the month for students to really begin developing and just,
Yes.
getting their concrete stuff down. Yeah.
Yes, I just really
So,
feel like no matter how many times we want to emphasize the time management during the essay drafting time, it's still every year. We're dealing with students last minute submit the application. So I think I want to add on two things. One, do not overwhelm yourself or your kids. Too many colleges, right? So yeah, I know it's about number, it's about chances, right? But the funny thing is like you won't increase your chance, even if you increase the number. Seriously. Because for example, every single school they ask you to write it, not only the Common App, but also the supplemental essay, the questions. So think about it, you are overwhelmed yourself with the top 10 or top 20 colleges. And literally you are dealing with almost more than 70 short and long, passages. So that's a lot of work. So when the work become accumulated, the quality drops. Every year we say the same thing, the quality drops. So we think control the college number in a certain amount, and we feel like the perfect number is like around 10 to 12. And if you're getting more, unless you're getting colleges without heavy essays, but if you put all the heavy essay colleges together, well, unless you are a strong writer, otherwise this is very suicidal action, I would say, because we do see students cannot finish the essay because the reason they give up the college. One of the example is from Stanford, right? A lot of students want to try Stanford, and then half of them gave up the Stanford during the essay writing because the essay is just like too much and it's too hard, and they just cannot, come up with the good stories. And the other thing I want to add on is like, you have to understand, you need to get a very, very good story. It's not about essay editing, because many cases parents ask me like, hey, I can write an essay. My kids can write an essay. Can you just help edit? So when I look at essay, usually I would say like, sorry, I can't help. We can't help. What we can do is we suggest you to rewrite, because the essay is just completely, completely wrong. When I say wrong, I mean very wrong, right? Dr. Grab, like later you can share the essay that is super
yeah.
wrong. Because I feel like a lot of parents, they and also students, they didn't realize that the essay is not a math question. It's not about a history question. It's not ask you to prove your thesis. It's not about you to analyze, oh, I'm excellent. So if you're going to that direction, you're never gonna get a good essay. So that is also something that every year we try to see students try to prove how amazing they are, how much they fit in the school. At the beginning, they say, oh, I think I would be a perfect engineer. And here's the reason, blah, blah, blah. When I was little, I like it. Then I started learning more. And then I got the competition that winning reward. And then it just kind of like poor. Yeah. When I say poor, I'm not talking about a writing skill. I'm talking about the content wise. You can't make a connection. You can't show who you are. You cannot build an image to make people understand like the 3D of you, right? It's just like a very plain application, but you need something to make yourself become vivid. And that is not the essay that you want to write. Yeah, we're going to talk more details later on. So the next part, I'm going to let a Dr. Public to explain a little bit about know your writing goals.
Right. And this also plays out something I was going to say that relates to what June just said, and that is I like to look at things more affirmatively, and that is I know it's tough to get started, but once you've got your Common App, your UC essays, and maybe your first school set of essays you're kind of going up the hill to that point, but then it's kind of downhill because for the other schools that come up, you'll be able to reuse and reapply a lot of your old material. So it's, no real reason to be overwhelmed. So some of the goals here that are key. Now, this is in selecting schools, why, and also in writing about that, why you match the school, their value in selecting quality, and why you're attractive to the school, what's unique about you. See, this is often a very difficult question. And this is one of the new things that when you start to go through the specific individual schools that students are going to have to research, and that is, what is it about that program that's really attractive to you? And I normally say, try to identify the 2 or 3 things at the program that were almost created uniquely for you, just for you, based on your academic goals, your personal, your career goals. And that could be one academic, there could be something extracurricular. And one thing that really helps with that is if you have the opportunity, and this does not go with the writing, but if you have a chance to visit the school or somehow make a contact, a key person at the program, and show and demonstrate that you have interest, that can go a long way in showing them that you've taken the time to find out about the program and you really find yourself to be a good fit for what the program's all about. But there are things you can write about too.
Yes, and you also need to do the homework, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I want to add on is like when we mentioned about why you match the school. I feel like many of the situations students more towards, oh, because that's a great school. I want to get into great school. Getting into a good school is not a good reason. And the other part of students say, I want to get, influenced by my peers, by smart people, right? So want to get exposed to the smart people is not a good reason either, because when you easily get influenced by the peers, we assume that you will get that influence first, right? So that is not a reason either. So you really want to know your values. Speaking of that, I think we also do some small exercise with students to find their value. If you're interested, you can later contact us. We can send you some value questions. You can do the value for your kids, and also you can do this together, right? So we realize that many of the family conflict, like the parents, kids, you guys cannot be on the same page. And when you finish the test, you will understand it totally because you guys have a totally different value. So the value has to match the school, right? For example, you don't really want to involve into the community. So if the school will really emphasize that part, you can't fake it, right? Because even you fake it, you get in, you don't feel comfortable. So finding the fittest school, that's what we have been always telling you. That's kind of like make you comfortable. So the college mission actually looking for that quality, looking for that value in your essay. Yeah, that's exactly what Dr. Grablik mentioned that. So the
Right.
next part, we want to talk about the time management for writing the essay. So Grablik already mentioned, have to start with June right now. So let's just do this way. What do you think that they have to at least come up with their final story, final draft by the deadline? What is the deadline for you, Dr. Grablik?
Do you mean for
The
a
draft.
comment?
Yeah, for Common App.
It should be, well, it depends on when we start working, because I'm not a big fan of going through an excessive number of drafts. But I figure by the time we're looking at about the third draft, after we discuss things and after students have explored possibilities, hopefully we'll have the idea, the main focus down. And I would say, sometime by the early fall would be really key for time management. But another important point to that is I tell students, instead of letting something hang over your head, try to schedule small blocks of time each day and actually say, for this 15-minute block, if that's all you have, I'm going to sit down and work on one specific thing for my essay. And that's how the whole thing gets put together, little bit, small bits at a time.
Yeah.
And how long should you take for writing one essay? If you were to calculate all the time involved, it's a fair amount of time. But for students to say, okay, if it takes 3 hours, I'm going to sit down for 3 hours and do it all. You can't, because there's one great blessing that comes from writing something, putting it away for maybe a week or more, looking at it again with a different and a fresh set of eyes and realizing, aha, I have a much better understanding of what I meant or what else I need to do or where I need to develop something. And this is just with a student working on his or her own.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, that's, I think, the important thing is not to procrastinate, but actually schedule times when you're going to work on something, even if it's just brainstorming. And
Well,
that's, yeah.
unfortunately, every one of them have a procrastinating track record. So if you feel like, oh, what if I'm, procrastinating? don't worry, everybody procrastinating, but you just don't want to go to the extreme that you're procrastinating in the last minute, right?
Yeah.
So when you submit application, unfortunately, on your profile, it says like what time you submitted. So you don't really want to wait for the last minute, because last year we even have students doing 2 seconds just before the deadline. It was such a exciting experience, because I'm even like almost got my heart bump out, So try to control the time, try to finish before as early as possible. The other thing, the question I want to add on is like, what can I do when I'm stuck in one essay? I would say, usually if you have a question like this, that means like you are just taking the prompt too seriously. And when you're reading the different prompts, you are like, oh, question 1, question 2, question 3. I actually suggest, correct me if you disagree, okay, Dr. Ravlik. So I actually suggest them just to forget about all the questions. Just think about who they are, how they want to present themselves. What are the stories that feel like, oh, that shows their value, shows their experience, like unique or important to them. Write them down. And when they write them down, we actually can help them reconnect to the prompts, right? Because all the prompts, the purpose, only one, they want to know you, right? But if you try to look at a question, for example, one of the questions says like, what is your failure, your setback, right? And my students say like, I don't have any failure. And then I stuck. I don't know how to write about it. I don't have any challenge. I never failed anything. What am I going to write about it? Write about you, write about your things that happen to you, things that are important to you. Write about that's the things like you value most. That's how you started. Just forget about the questions if you're stuck in one essay.
Yeah, I entirely agree. Great. So, and a lot more of that can be said as we go through each of these here too. Now we're going to look at next the personal insight questions, the PIQs for UC. And this really relates to what Jun was saying too. And that's what I often tell students when you're trying to come up with the best stories for your UC set, don't worry so much about the prompts, but think about what are the best examples that you can offer about yourself. And this is a good chance for you to show the variety and the diversity of your interest and experience. And you'll notice that we have a bunch of keywords highlighted here, and what they're looking for you from you, something that relates to your leadership, how you've been creative, how you've overcome a challenge. They do want at some point to find out what academically is of interest to you, what you've done for the bigger community. You've got the positive and social impact. And there's also that one at the end, which is basically, is there something else that you want to tell us about that hasn't been covered here? So you're free to give something that doesn't really fit into one of these molds. And that's, again, why the whole idea of what do you do if you're stuck on one essay, work on another one. What the students who sit there and say, I don't even know how to start the essay because they think they want to have the perfect beginning. Start in the middle, start with the body,
Yes.
the bulk of the essay. And you have a wonderful opportunity here to develop stories you're going to use not just for UC, but for everywhere else. Realize that there's no one essay that's used just once.
Yes, agree. And also when you try to, come up with some like a good start, you can just have different versions, right? So I feel like every year we have students write different versions of essay and tell us like, hey, which one you like more? And then, we give score, we vote, I think that's a pleasant experience I had. Instead of like, we just have like 2-3 lines every time after meeting. We say, oh, yeah, I can talk about this and that. And eventually you'll have like 2-3 lines and never progress. I think that just kind of like, can tell where you are. So every year based on the essay progress, we actually can tell if you need to add on more aggressive college. For example, I do have students after they write essay and just kind of like the first draft is like a final version. So I told her, I was like, oh, girl, you need to try Harvard, Stanford, you need to try because it's amazing. Is that your first draft? They say, yeah, that's my first draft. And there's no need for any kind of like comments or edit. It's just like a perfect, good to go, So that's the time, you can actually handle better college. You can actually handle more aggressive college. But if you start an essay, you can't like literally just write your first paragraph or body, or you just stuck there. And the part of the reason you don't want to do it, right? There's not like really enough pressure for you to do it, or the opposite way. There's too much pressure that you don't know how to start it. That's the time that you are actually far from those aggressive colleges. You might think about it going to the safer die, going to the safer ranking, safer side, and you don't want to kind of like progress too much, right? And I never get any experience that a students ask us questions, say, hey, I can't write my essay. What should I do? And we keep tracing, oh, please write, please write. I got into a top college. Never, never. Okay. So if you start writing essay and you can tell two kind of students will get into their dream school. One, you just know how to write. Two, you are not good at writing, but you are trying. You're trying so hard. You're trying different way. Even every draft is like not really good enough, but you keep writing, and with help, with support, you can be there. So the third type, like I'm not good at writing, I don't want to try, and just keep pushing, pushing, and it cannot have a progress. And that's the time I feel like parents should know, is the time for you to step in, or is that time for you to get more support, because that's the time is also showing you that the kids will not survive when they get into the college. So that's why we want to make sure that actually, I don't know if you agree with me, essay writing can tell half of the result already.
Yeah, and some of the discipline of the whole thing, but I think anyone can certainly, make themselves better.
Yes.
With time and discipline, willingness. Now, the next several slides are going to go through each of the UC PIQs. And what I was thinking of, June, is possibly throwing in, so just going through the bullet points, maybe some examples or how these can be used for a given student. And because I've worked with enough students and I know how different people have gone about showing balance or a different side of them themselves.
Of course.
And so the first one here is about leadership. Now, the bullet points that you see here on the right side, these are some suggestions that were given at the UC website and some things that you can do. They're asking, how have you made an impact on others? What is your leadership experience? How have you been, influential? And it's true that a lot of students are at a young age, maybe not so, they'll be a little bit put off saying, I've never really been in a leadership position. But it doesn't have to be class president. It doesn't have to be the captain of a sports team. You may have done something in which your group of friends, in which you took on a position of leadership, or maybe you established something. Maybe you established a new club at your school. I'm thinking of things people did before. I had one student who I think for this essay, he was a pre-med, very STEM based, and he wrote a story about how when he was playing soccer, one of his teammates was wearing glasses. The glasses broke, and he would have been out for the rest of the game. And this student who I was working with saw some students eating McDonald's in the bleachers, and he's like, "Aha! I can use some of the broken, the leftover containers, and I can fashion a little fix for the guy's glasses." And that's what he did. He called the timeout, and they wound up winning the game. The guy whose glasses were fixed kicked a game-winning goal, and my student assisted on it. So it made for a really nice story of how leadership is sometimes what you do in the moment without expecting to have to take a leadership position. And these are often things we discover by letting students just freely, write some things or talk to us and let us know about what are some things that you did. Don't just repeat all the activities in your list. Tell us about the story behind one of the things you did of one of your activities. And that's where you can really come across and show a different side of yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's another
Creative
example.
side. Good. Creative side, problem solving, original, innovative thinking. Let me just say overall, because I want to make sure we have time to get to these sample essays, that if you have someone who's more STEM based, there's this preconception that these people are not as creative. So this would be a good time for this student to possibly talk about the poetry he or she wrote, maybe a competition, songwriting efforts, something to show that this student is broadly interested and broadly experienced. And that's really what schools want to have, a student body, students who have a diversity of interests, who are willing to try new things, who already have done that. So we have what is here, greatest talent or skill. How have you developed or demonstrated it? This is often one that will more so relate to a student's major, not necessarily, because I've had students whose bigger talent or skill may have involved conflict resolution among people, even though they were going into a different field whatsoever altogether. So they say so much more about this, but we're trying to cover the really important things. A significant educational opportunity. or work to overcome an educational barrier. A lot of students I work with don't pick this one. Oh, and by the way, of these UC prompts, you get to pick, you're supposed to pick and have to pick four, each of which can be no more than 250 words long. So many students here may, for example, have a COVID story, for some reason that they something happened to keep themselves from getting a higher GPA, so they may have taken an extra course over the summer. I had one student who wanted to take an AP class in one specific thing that her school didn't offer. So she actually tracked down a teacher who was willing to be her faculty mentor. And this student did most of the work to fill out the paperwork, to have the school registered, to get the material. But she found a way to get that, and it really did help her in her overall applications. This could also be a way a student overcame an actual learning difficulty. But whenever there's a challenge or a difficulty, just the key thing that I want to stress, spend less time on the negative and more time on what was done to overcome it and the positive results. That's what the schools really want to hear.
I also put into our UC essay blog into the chat box if you're interested in reading more detailed UC essay structure, how to write it, and you can read our blogs. Yeah. So I'm quickly going to the number 5.
Yeah, this one also a significant challenge. It's similar to the previous one. I rarely have students do both number 4 and number 5, but here again, if there's some sort of a challenge, academic or otherwise, that you had to deal with, these can make for excellent stories. A lot of times, students will have a challenge in life, academically or personally, that serves as the main Common App essay. And I really tell people to make your life easier, whatever you write for your Common App, use a shortened version of that for one of your UC essays. And this is often the one. And UC does not take Common App. This next one, and this is a good opportunity for a student to talk about a major, an academic subject that inspires you. That's not the universal truth, though, because I have a great story of a student from a few years ago who was on a STEM track. He had already been doing a lot of work to prepare himself for a career as a medical researcher, but he, for some reason, got really inspired by the Arabic language and devoted a lot of time reading, listened to podcasts, other recordings, learned the different local varieties and dialects, the national languages. So, and it was something that really made him stand out and different from other pre-med applicants. What have you done to make your school or community a better place? A great way to show your other directedness, your altruism. Okay. Something that you may have, especially if it's something that you began on your own, that you were innovative about. You recognize that there were certain people not being served. It could be your school community, it could be your local community. In fact, you can define community any way you want to. The next one, and this is just,
yeah.
June?
Is the last one.
Okay. Yeah, this is one. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about? I'll just say one great opportunity here is if you look at your activities list and there's one activity that you really haven't had much opportunity to talk about, and it would show here again a different side of you, a different facet of that diamond, who you are. Tell a little story about something you did within that activity. Don't just list off general things, but just pick that moment. The better essays are in the moment. Talk about what happened over, let's say, a couple hours during a day, as opposed to just a broad overview of 2 years of activities.
Yes, I agree. And basically for the UC prompt from 1 to 8, and besides what Dr. Grablich just mentioned, we also have a detailed analysis for each prompt on our website blog, which I already sent into the chat box. If hopefully everybody can take a look at it. From 1 to 8, we have all the tips for the previous essay part. So let's jump into the favorite part that many colleges and also teachers would like to talk about. We want to start with the Common App, and we want to start with the Cornell University first.
Okay, so Cornell, let's read from the top here because we have different questions that are Cornell specific. In the online content, please respond to the essay question below, maximum of 650. That, by the way, is the length of the Common App essay.
I really don't like the maximum number that a limit is, because every time when I read a student stories and we have to cut them down in short, that is the pinpoint part that for me, because I literally feel like a lot of essays should not, show the complete beauty, when they cut them in short. But at the same time, I understand, because at the beginning, I think I mentioned that for the entire college application review, every student have about 15 minutes. So that 15 minutes, they probably have 5 minutes for your essay. So if you can't really get their attention, they're probably going to skip your essay even faster. So that's why I feel like 650 for the essay reviewer, that's just a lot of work because they have to read a lot, right? So, but for us, we have to really show ourselves with a certain amount of the words, how to do that. So later on, we can give you some like more tips. But for me, I can throw in first and then Dr. Grabley can, illustrate more. So I feel like two things always get my attention. One is conflict. If I saw the conflict at the beginning of the essay, I feel like, oh, I'm interested, right? And if you create a mystery at the beginning, I am interested. What I'm not interested, what I feel like is super plain and a dry and a boring, is kind of like at the beginning of the essay, I know exactly what you're going to talk about. I'm definitely going to skip the entire essay, which I just finished a couple of like admission mock before days ago. And we actually go through a lot of different students and based on the student's profile, based on the college requirement, we actually give the score to find out, which students meet in what score and what is the final score, who will be waitlisted, who will be accepted, who will be rejected. This type of training is actually happen a lot for every single college, right? And so we internally going to do that for our students every year. So we just really feel like you need to understand without interesting beginning, without conflict, without mystery. If you're just trying to make it just like a Q&A, you will never get there. Yeah, so that's why you have to really spend a time to think about it. So Grablik mentioned about the STEM students. Well, I would say especially STEM students. Okay.
Right. And let me just add a few things on top of that. And I agree because I say at the beginning, you have to hook them in. You have to make the reader interested and want to find out more about you. So I often like to put it because conflict, mystery, things like that. Set the table. Don't give too much background. Set the table and set the stakes. Let the reader know that there's something right at stake that's important here within just the first couple sentences and move on. Let's start telling the story and finding out about you. And
Exactly.
to get to 650, you'll often have to write, 1,000, 1,500 words so that we can get the best 650 down. And I'm really good at helping students know where we can trim the fat, where the parts are that aren't as important, don't move things forward. So
Yeah.
I know students on their own, they write 650 and think they're done. That's usually not going to cut it.
Yes.
So,
I agree. And also I give an example to students. I say it's kind of like you are going to the theater and you want to watch movie and the movie start and you were so excited. And then the movie immediately tell you this is about a movie that a King Kong killed them all in the end, survived. Okay, let's start watching the movie. Nobody want to watch anymore because you already tell the result, right? But it happens a lot in the student's essay. It's very, very interesting. Yeah, so just kind of like using different technique. So Dr. Grabley can share more details later on. Yeah. You want to talk about this or you want to go to the next part?
let's go to the next part. Because let me just say this: that this gives you some of the specific questions about Cornell schools. And again, I'll just say be specific. We talked about that before, but I think it's more important given the time right now, so that there's time opportunity for Q&A to look at some of the samples. Now, the classic essay structure here: narrative style or anecdotal style. Some of the questions there under the useful challenges. Challenges, as June mentioned. You want to find out about some sort of conflict, mystery, something difficult, either a challenge you took on, a challenge you were faced with. Those make for great stories. Okay. But don't just start talking about, I once was faced with the challenge that boring. Okay. It's the same King Kong thing. I like the movie metaphor. What did you,
What about the students never experience any challenges?
Oh, they probably have. Well, that's not the only thing that they can write about. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember a case of a student one time who explained that she's one of the most boring people ever and couldn't come up with anything interesting she'd ever done or challenging. And that became the theme of the essay. It was one of the most interesting essays possible, finding out all the different ways in which she was boring. So,
Mm. Well,
you
that's a
know,
cute one. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. And also, I feel like if you are not like a, 12th grade yet, and you're not going to college application yet, if you're ninth grade, if you're like 10th grade, give them time for them to face some challenges. Because I just kind of feel like when a challenge happens, parents panic. Parents want somebody to help them to fix it,
hmm,
right? So if you want somebody to fix challenges, fix the problem for you, for your kids, Later on, when they write about a challenge, the only thing he can think about is somebody fix for me. So there is no process, no story. And I mean, it kind of makes sense why a lot of students have a lot of story, and every single story, if you look into, is pain, is tears, is hard time. It's really, really suffering at that time. That became story. If you never suffer, you never experience anything, that's no story. There's no story. So it's kind of like explain that when you are still ninth grade, 10th grade, do not really pave the way for them. Let them have some space and room. And when I work with my students, sometimes I give them suggestions, let them to do something. And the parents calling me like, hey, why there's no progress? I was like, can you wait? Can you give him some time? And oh, I want this, to be done within this month. And I was like, well, I can make it down next week. But the thing is, like, what is your kids is trying to do, right? So for those type of time and the space, I think we really have to give the kids. So if you're ninth grade, 10th grade, if you never feel like any challenge moment, if you never get any problem, you probably want to look for some problem or challenges in some, okay? If you don't have it, you can just come to me. I can give you some challenge to solve. Okay, I have plenty of challenges. Okay. All right, moving forward, I want you to start analyzing the sample essay.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was going to say that it's good that students in ninth and 10th grade start to look on and do other personal projects. And I know that June 7EDU gives a lot of opportunities for that. I know that on the screen things are a little bit small, so I'm going to be looking, I think, at my own version of it. Now, this
Yes,
is a
please.
sample essay that was written for the Common App. And this was usable we didn't have the Common App prompts there, but there's another thing too. I tell students, don't worry about the prompt because if you have a good story, we can figure out which prompt it will fit to. And this one could work for the first or the seventh one, possibly others. And I'm going to read a little bit at the very beginning. Okay. Every Saturday morning, I'd awaken to the smell of crushed garlic and piquant pepper. All right. Now, what was said on the previous slide was give something that's vivid, anecdotal in the moment. You want the reader to almost feel as though he or she were there, like a fly on the wall, experiencing what you were. And if they can, they'll be intrigued and they'll want to read further. And that's where the movie metaphor comes in. Create the picture for them. Don't give something general that the reader's going to have to fill in the blanks for. Okay. And this right there, it's a Saturday morning. Okay. So I know what that means to me, often a more relaxed time. And we're appealing right there to the smell of crushed garlic and piquant pepper. I can smell that. In fact, this goes on to describe making kimchi with a grandmother. And I get from Italian cuisine. I know the smell of crushed garlic and piquant pepper very well. So I can relate to that too. Anyone can. And then a student writes, I'd stumble into the kitchen to find my grandma squatting over a large silver bowl, a nice visual. And it's not just a bowl, it's a large silver bowl. So a lot of times those details are key. Mixing fat lips of fresh cabbages with garlic, salt, and red pepper. This is how the delectable Korean dish kimchi was born every weekend in my home. Now, that's a nice way of setting the table, letting you know what's going on here. It's a memory, a youthful memory. The whole story is not going to be that. And let's say later on, this goes on to how the student came to deal with her grandmother's um, cognitive issues, her dementia. And it was a really nice personal story. And you find out a lot about the person. That's something else they'll say. With these Common App essays, they're almost like your on paper interview. What do you find out about the person? Is the student who wrote this the kind of individual that you would really want to meet and who you know that other people could gain insight from? What qualities come across with this whole thing? And I have a list of different qualities and didn't have time to go through a bunch of them here, but of course, taking initiative, all right, showing ethics or integrity, capitalizing on opportunities, being reflective, being a leader, being proactive, a lot of things like that. So this right away is an excellent example of how the beginning hooks the reader in and makes that person want to know more. And if you can
Great.
also be identified as the blank person, this might be the kimchi student. That's great. I had a student one time who was known as the Jordan person because he talked about how he once played basketball against Michael Jordan. It was a pickup game when Michael Jordan was thinking about making a comeback. And that didn't even relate to the rest of the essay. It was just a hook. And then he talked about something else. It's what I often call the Simpsons hook. But he wanted to be, oh, you're the Jordan guy. Come here. I want to talk to you. The college people would say that to him.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
Yeah, I also want to remind everybody because I know there's like a tons of essay samples out there, and you might have someone send it to you the essay, or you might have like a great essay. You also need to pay attention if the essay is originally your essay or your story. Because I also know like many of the chances the students ask me like, what about this essay? If it fits many of the essay when they read it, they cannot really reflect who you are. So the best way to do is just kind of like using original one. And don't be bothered by a lot of like samples, right? So the great essay, there are a lot. You keep reading it, there's nothing you can get. You might learn some like a metaphor or something, but you can't really exactly fit in your story. For example, if you give the essay and Dr. Rabley just analyzed the essay, you might think about it. Oh, I'm gonna have a Saturday morning. I will like wake up with the smell of like a crushed onion. I might want to change it, but it doesn't really work out because the whole entire story is different. Because I did read a similar essay last application season. When I read it, and I'm like, why is this so familiar? It reminds me something, I just cannot tell. But then I search for it, then I tell, oh yeah, this is like a sample essay online, and a student just like a transfer into his own story. He changed a lot of elements, but the entire structure, everything else is same. It's just so cute, and I would just like cannot stop laughing because I say, how why you are so smart? I mean, smart, right? Just try to steal somebody's story to your. It doesn't really work out because the perfect essay and a perfect story, I would say, have to align with the your letter, with your activity, with everything. So you really want to try your best to use the 2D's application, make to be as vivid as possible, make to be a 3D, and make people to read it. So yeah, this is a good essay to show, and this is a lot of like I would say it's pretty vulnerable, and I can feel connected, and I'm interested to know the person, right? So yeah, let's go to another example. I consider this as another example you want to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say a couple things to that, and maybe in lieu of this one, but you're right. I have the same issue sometimes too. Students will look at samples and they'll try to model what they do on other samples, and that's not the way to go. What's
Yeah.
successful though is that these essays, they don't give big, broad overviews of a life story. They talk about the key highlights of maybe one or two incidents, maybe that are connected, or maybe just one.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I remember that was really great and it wasn't based on anything was a student who talked about how his family moved from someplace I won't specify, East Asia, to North America because the family wanted new opportunities. And he talked about his first day in high school and described the typical high school. And I even said it's like a John Hughes movie. He didn't know who that was, but he looked it up and said, okay, described what the students were wearing, the clothing, the books. And then he said, then I sat down in my first class and the teacher welcomed us with bonjour. Suddenly, we realized this student was in Canada, in Montreal, in Quebec, and he wasn't just there to learn English. He knew some English. He was in a classroom in which they were speaking French. Oh, now he has an extra challenge to overcome. And so he gave a nice, vivid description at the start. And that was not based on anyone else's essay. So I tell people, or when June, you probably know this too, when you talk with the students, you'll often find what would make for an interesting story. And when you read one of these samples, and this is another caution about it, you see something that reads amazingly well from the beginning to end, and you think the student just sat down and typed it out because Hollywood gives us the mistaken impression that that's how it's done. No, these essays are built often from the middle outward or often from one tiny idea in a long bit of brainstorming that just developed and took on a life
Uh-huh.
and turned into something this amazing.
Yeah. And there's another risk that I want to mention is as like 2 years ago, I remember I had a student have a very, very good essay. He's such a good writer. However, when I read the essay, I just kind of feel like it's just not real, feels like that way, Then I'm like, oh, did your friend like really jump into the river suicide? And he's like, no, I'm just trying to use a dramatic way to start my essay. That is also a mistake. Don't fake it, okay? Don't fake it. Don't try to create a drama. Just try to just grab people's attention. There is
Right.
tons of way, and you can do it. Yeah. So that's also the mistake that you don't want to try to. It's kind of like similar thing. Don't try to steal somebody's story into yours. Right. For example, if you never be discriminated, don't mention. If you never be like bullied, you don't have to describe because when you describe, it just like making people immediately know you never experienced that. That's just so wrong, so fake, right? Because the real feeling will flow. The fake feeling will have used to so many different ways to do it. I also have a student trying to write things about LGBTQ, right? Because he is not able to write correctly. So he actually found some friends from the LGBTQ group and then try to get some like a fast and add on some community. And when I look at his essay has like more than 8 people add on it. Oh boy, I just don't really know how to lead that essay because it's just kind of like it sounds like a discord, it doesn't look like a one person's story. Yeah.
Right. Well, I guess maybe I'll say one last thing here too, relating to what June said. The other, don't for right now, don't use Chat GPT.
Oh, okay, boy. Well, actually they won't, because the first thing I do is I check them in a anti Chat GPT
Yeah.
because I want to make sure like how many percentage was AI. That's exactly what a college gonna do. But I
So,
don't
and
know
again,
where are you gonna go because the ChatGPT is gonna become more and more popular, and the college was like headache. So last year they add on more like a video essay, they add last more like a essay sample, writing sample. What do you think, Graphic?
yeah, no, I know that just because of that, schools have become more vigilant in making sure or checking to see that things are not written by something generated. And of course, throughout history, we've always had the issue, and June touched on that, of someone else writing an essay for a student. And that's why there are other essay samples I'll ask for. I like the idea of a video sample. That's good as well. But
Yeah.
at
But
least for
that
right
also
now, given
creates
this,
like an inequality for the education because they think a lot of people cannot even afford it to, shooting video or make the video, editing software, stuff like that. I don't know where this is gonna go. What do you think? But I say, with like AI writing, with a lot of like tech writing supporting, and then it's gonna be the AI era, right? So what we're gonna do without college essay, I think that's also something question the college cannot even answer at this moment.
I will say that if you look at some of these really good essays, because of the personal quality and just because I don't think that AI can be really taught how to be human or emotional, right? To find that connection in things. AI may be really good at doing dry and dull reports, at least for right now. We have no idea how it's going to be functioning in a year, 10 years from now. But at least at the moment, there's no replacement for the human factor in creating good quality essays such as these.
I have a faith in the humanity. Let's wait
Yeah.
and see. Okay, another example.
Well, I think we're about, we're coming close to time. It's almost 8, but I could say a few things on this one. I chose this second one, and there are a lot that I could have, just because this student took a fairly different approach. And it reminded me of the woman who said, I'm really boring and dull. What can
Hmm.
we do about that? And this starts off by saying, I'm on Oxford Academy's speech and debate team in both the parliamentary debate division and the Lincoln Douglas debate division. It almost sounds like the wrong way to start an essay because this student seems to be just writing something off of an activities list. And then
Yeah,
I
it's
write
kind of
screen.
like it's like a questions, right? Q&As, right?
Yeah. And then the second line is I write screenplays, short stories, and opinionated blogs, and am a regular contributor to my school literary magazine, The Glue Stick. I've accumulated over 300 community service hours. It's like the student is doing everything wrong and just bragging. But then if the reader goes down to paragraph 2, you get this. But I am not any of these things. Just kidding. I'm not a test scorer, nor a debater, nor a writer. I am an anti-nihilist punk rock philosopher, and I became so when I realized 3 things. Aha. Now, of course, this student is taking a bit of a risk that the reader is going to get past that beginning, which is a deceptive beginning, and
Hmm.
realize the student has a very different perspective and take on life, an anti-nihilist punk rock philosopher. But it goes on to be a very, very fascinating and very different
Hmm.
maverick type essay. And so sometimes you take a risk like that, the payoff can be really big. But
Yes,
certainly, yeah, engage people from the start.
I agree. I agree. So, well, just the summary in one sentence, right? So you may not able to write a good essay, but you definitely can tell if the essay is good or not. So that's also something that I suggest parents to read your kids' essay questions.
Right.
All right. So if you have any question, you can type in the chat box. We are actually going to host some essay workshop. So feel free to Google 7EDU and to find out more for the workshop. And welcome to bring the kids to come to the office to write essay about it. And we also have students volunteer who used to, join the application last season, who successfully get admitted, and they will also support and volunteer to help the kids to progress the essay for this coming application season. Thank you, Dr. Ravlik.
Thank you, June. Thank you, everyone. So.
Yeah, we prepared a lot of information, so it's kind of like have to rush to the end. Okay. I think you can log out now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
If
you.
you have a question, I will just pass to you. All right.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. So anyone have any questions that we have a questionnaire, so you could reach out to us and we will reach out to you as soon as possible.
Yeah. Feel
We'll
free
type
to
it
send
in.
us the essay. Feel free to send your profile, and we're going to give the evaluation to make sure that to guide you to finish this application season. But for this application season, we actually decided not going to take the last minute essay, because most of time is like when the ED finish, right? When the result came out, we get a lot of like requests during the application end of the application season, like a Christmas season. This year we decided not going to take anything anymore. So just to get ready, okay? Just get ready.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah. Thank you, June, for your precious time.
Hi, Lei, if you missed today's meeting, you can just join the second one because we're going to continue hosting the essay workshop. So please contact Wendy and for the next time. And yeah, we also have like the essay brainstorm session one-on-one as well, so don't worry.